Hello, everyone. So welcome to our first episode to our Leadership in IT podcast. So as consultants in Codurance, obviously we deal with a lot of code, but we know that for more challenging projects like software modernization, cloud migration, or general IT transformation, technical mastery may not be enough. And this is where vision, mission, and strategy for a project comes in. Obviously, along with that comes the necessity of specific leadership traits. And this is what we are going to be talking about with my colleague.
Hi, everyone. So, I'm Simon Shaw, and I work as a regional director here at Codurance. So I work across our Manchester and Leeds office.
My name is Mac. I'm a principal software craftsperson at Codurance. So, Simon, so how simple should be the why for a project?
I think really as simple as possible, really. I mean, I think it's an interesting one, this. I think, ideally, you want it to be ambitious and visionary and something that people can really engage with on quite a deep level. So I think there needs to be an impact to the vision, and yet I think it needs to be something that people can digest and understand. So I think there's a balance as ever to strike here, but I think something that people can kind of understand and relate to, and once they've heard it, I guess almost an acid test is, could someone then explain it to someone else? So that would be my take. How about you, Mac?
Yeah, I think it's more art than science, I guess, because as you mentioned, finding that fine balance, I guess, between the vision and mission being concise enough that you can do, let's say, a typical elevator pitch, right? As well, so that you have 1 minute to present what you're doing, where are you aiming at, what you're aiming for, but also holding enough substance as well, so that it's not too generic, right? So that you're doing something specific. And we know it's quite clear, although it's quite concise, it's quite clear why are we going for this cloud migration? Why are we going for this software modernization project? There is this technical as well as the business vision in it as well, right? So, for example, in my case, what I try to aim for is to go, let's say, for a single slider, right? So I'm a very visual person. So I like to start with some visuals, then move them around, let's say, and then eventually, obviously talking with my team colleagues, with my stakeholders as well. I start with this more visual exercise and combine various things. And at some point they start to click. I get a good feedback on them, and then there's one slider, let's say, comes up. I'm not sure what's your.
I think so. Yeah, I think ideally you need something that is fairly simple and quick to convey and communicate. I think that's important. I think if you're having to spend too long articulating and describing the vision in too many words, I think that's going to perhaps kind of lose something. So I think that's an inherent part of vision, isn't it? It is a visual thing. I think there's something in that word vision, isn't there? I guess one thing that is interesting here is how important it is to be a realistic vision. I mean, I've always thought that a strong vision should inspire people and motivate them, and yet how do you strike that balance between people going away feeling inspired and motivated and engaged, and yet thinking this is realistic for my organization, my team, the project I'm about to join, that kind of stuff. So yeah, how do you think you can strike that balance between something really inspirational and yet something that people feel is achievable?
So I think I'm going to look at it from this perspective, I guess, and this is why I believe it should be collaborative exercise. Because if, I'm the team lead, I'll figure this stuff out. You guys take care of the tickets and the codes. It's I'll figure out the vision and mission. Well, I don't believe that's, it's a fruitful exercise in the end, because it will be a very narrow vision, and it may be detached from the reality, from the context of the organizational context, from roadmap of the business, also from the technical capabilities of your team and the organization as well, right? So I'll be very cautious of doing it this way. And to be honest, I did it this way and I failed actually. And I learned the hard way that you need to do it ideally in a collaborative way. And again, there's a fine balance here as well. As a team lead, you need to make some hard decisions as well. But getting that feedback from down the chain of command, so from your team members, like other people at that level, let's say maybe some architects as well, and directly from your stakeholders and even C-level people, get some feedback and get some insight as well. So that's, that mission and vision can be as comprehensive and as, let's say, built for measure for the existing context of the company.
Yeah.
So collaboration, I guess, with decisiveness in specific moments as well is the key, let's say.
I think that's right. I think there has to be common ownership, hasn't there? I think a vision that's just presented top down, okay, everybody, this is what we've decided we're going to do. Now go ahead and execute and do. I think that's likely to fail. And certainly, in my experience, I can talk about a bit of a failure here as well. I've been involved when I was working for a product-based company where it was very much a top-down vision, and for various reasons, there wasn't full buy-in from across the rest of the organization and from the teams that would be delivering against that vision. And eventually we got that back on track, and we did get that buy-in and ownership, but it took quite a while to achieve that, and we went through a period where there wasn't that common ownership and that joint understanding. And therefore, I think you can't really execute on a vision without the team understanding, buying in, as we talked about a few minutes ago, feeling motivated. And so I think there's definitely a point here around ownership. And one thing you've said there a couple of times, which I think is really worth spending a little bit of time on here, is about metrics and measuring, because I talked around something visionary and inspirational. I think that's important, but equally, you're right that there has to be a means, I would think, of being able to track progress towards that vision. So have you found that that's an important thing to do quite early on in the journey here, to define some metrics so that there is a visible means, a tangible means of assessing progress?
I definitely found out the hard way that if you do it too late, you'll have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So I guess as early as possible. Again, that's I guess balance to strike here as well, because early on it would be quite hard to have that crisp, clear notion and view of what those metrics should be. Obviously, you'll be talking to your stakeholders, to the architects, and all the senior engineers, and so you'll get a sense of what are the the SDLC impediments. Is the lead time too long? Are there many bugs being introduced? Are the bugs being addressed for way too long, for example, right? So all those things you need to figure out as early as possible, and it will give you some idea of what you should be aiming at, which usually is in a spectrum of like cost optimization, and the other side of the spectrum is the business agility. And usually what we'll be aiming at is somewhere between that spectrum. I didn't ever work on a project or led a project that was specifically focused 100% on cost optimization or focus 100% on business agility. It's usually somewhere in between as well.
Yep.
So, but striving for that as early as possible, I think, is key. So we covered quite a few things, right? So there's a balance between like how much content, like how big should be the vision, should be one slide, couple of slides. Also, like how tangible should be the vision. Obviously, it has to be like visionary, obviously, but also achievable. And also, the third thing is a balance between, again, that let's try to improve things, but also need to make sure that there are some metrics that we can be showing to the business that actually we are progressing and it's bringing a certain value to them. Is there anything else? we missed, possibly?
No, I think it's a good sum up of what we've discussed so far.
Sounds good. Okay, so in terms of maybe like leadership qualities as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you see that happening? Obviously, because would you see a one team lead who is, has those leadership traits? He's very visionary. He's has technical mastery, or would be fine that it's just shared responsibility because um, everyone in the team has some leadership traits, and in collaboration they are pushing for that. Or always there has to be this one person as this like internal engine of that driving the mission and vision.
Yeah, I think perhaps not necessarily one person. So I think there's a strong element here where, there's always a leadership team or an executive team in an organization. So if we assume that it's that team that has, in the first place, kind of created and articulated the vision for the organization or for a transformation program or a project, perhaps, I think there's a very strong argument here that team, or it may be an individual, but I kind of would like to think of it as a leadership team, needs to really collectively, they need to act as role models and to display, the correct behaviors and to be authentic. And I know this is a bit of a cliche, but really to walk the talk here. So having set out what the vision is and engaged with the rest of the organization to validate that vision, I think there's a very strong argument that that team, or perhaps it is an individual, will continue to, bang the drum and display all the correct values to make a contribution to land that vision. Having said that, I think leadership can and should be displayed at all levels of an organization. It's not about hierarchy here or about people having certain job titles. So I think the best instances where organizations, achieve something quite transformational is where there is kind of common and joint ownership and people really kind of buy in. So that would be my take. It's not so much looking to one individual to display, all the leadership qualities that are going to be required here. I think there is a shared responsibility. Having said that, I genuinely think for something to be transformational, there is a space, or in fact, not so much a space. I think there is a real kind of need for the leadership team to kind of display those kind of role model type qualities. But that's my take. That's my experience. I wonder where you are on that one.
So I think from my perspective, I would say that's usually in most of the cases, there is that one person that is like the driving force, and it's quite clear. Not always, but in most of the cases from my experience and my projects, it's all usually that's one person that is the driving force. Obviously, there may be many people having those leadership qualities as well, but in the end, like, I guess this is the way you think. In the end, we look up to this one person to make some decisions. So obviously, as a team lead, you need to allow your members to have the discussion so they feel they are involved, they are parts of that mission and vision, they are creating that mission and vision. But like from my experience, like they're always looking at you. It's like, is she going to make the decision finally? No, yeah. Okay, we're going to talk more because we can talk for days about that. But in the end, they'll be looking at you if you're the lead to make some decisions. So this is something what I mentioned previously. It's a collaborative exercise, but this one person who is the driving force. Okay, this is enough of discussion. This is what I think it is. Is it correct? Yes. Okay, let's go for it. No. Okay, let's have a bit more discussion. But like that's what I found is like your team members are looking at you to make those key decisions at those milestones as the mission.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right, Mike. And I think ultimately change does start at the top. And I think people expect and in a sense probably should demand that change starts at the top and is authentic and is, consistent. I guess one thing which again I found is important in my experience here is having a culture, a psychologically safe culture. So, is there an appetite? Is there a culture for experimentation, for learning from mistakes, and embracing to a degree, you perhaps not always delivering exactly what you said you would do, how you said you would do it by certain dates. So, having a culture of learning quickly, experimenting, and without blaming, so that you can take some stepping stones towards achieving your vision, whilst acknowledging this isn't a straight line. It's a bit more of a squiggly line, and there will be peaks and troughs. And I think that's important too, from a leadership perspective. Do you accept and embrace that things will happen in the way that you perhaps don't anticipate them?
Mm-hmm.
And is there a culture of, yes, learning from that, that kind of feedback loop?
Yeah.
So I think that's the other aspect here of leadership, creating that kind of culture.
Yes, thanks for mentioning that, because this is, I think, relates to what we mentioned at the beginning, that it's literally impossible to figure out that mission and vision like straight away. It's an iterative process, and the best way to go about it is to experiment right along the way. Because from my experience, it takes, well, let's say a good couple of sprints to chisel out even the initial draft of that mission and vision, right? So they'll keep working, but also that experimentation along the way allows for the creation of that mission and vision. Otherwise, it will be just some fairy tale. That's from my experience in the end. And some promises that, well, as a team lead, let's say you're a team lead for the first time and you want to impress your manager, and it's like you come up with in a week, that's the mission vision. And it's like, yeah, he's very excited, but along the way, it just doesn't work. It's a fairy tale. It has no metrics. It's like, you didn't plan like how to measure this thing. It's completely unreasonable in terms of achieving those things, right? So again, collaboration and allowing for that experimentation, and iteratively, we should have that diamond in our hands, hopefully. So
yeah, I think that's right. And one aspect of this, which I think is also maybe sometimes overlooked, is let's assume that you've been able to, or the organization has been able to create that vision. Maybe it's just on a slide or two. It's something very visual, and it's something visionary and aspirational, and that people engage. But I also think it's probably unrealistic that everybody in the organization, or perhaps a team, let's say it's a project or a program team, will immediately buy into that vision straight away. I think there will always be some skeptics. And in fact, that's probably quite a healthy thing. So I wondered if you'd had any experience around almost looking for ambassadors. So on the basis that, yes, not everybody will immediately completely buy into a vision, particularly if it's something really transformational and really quite different from the status quo.
Yeah.
Looking for ambassadors, looking for other people, other change advocates, I guess you could call them, that can, together with perhaps the leader or the leadership team, begin to set the right tone and begin to change the culture and change behaviors. And then you would hope that in time, the number of advocates and ambassadors grows, and that eventually do have most, if not necessarily absolutely everybody, on board in terms of delivering that vision. So have you had any experience or success there, looking for those change advocates, those ambassadors?
So it's a very interesting point when we bring on the table the types of projects we are dealing with as Codurance consultants, which is mostly software modernization, cloud migration, or generally some kind of transformation. Obviously, you also have those greenfield product development projects, but it's usually quite obvious. There's usually a very well-rounded set of acceptance criteria. The business knows what they want, what's the next big thing, let's say, and it's far easier. Let's say brownfield project as well. It's a well-established project. It's usually about maintaining a legacy system and meeting your SLAs. I guess that's kind of the general mission and vision. And you don't need to be visionary, let's say, to is successfully leading that kind of a project. But when it comes to modernization and cloud migration, so something like deeply transformational, yes, you have a lot of work on your hands. First of all, when it comes to figuring out that mission and vision, but also how to share it, how to communicate it, and how to get the rest of the organization on your side. So from my experience, and I guess I'm still figuring that out because I don't think there's a single answer to that. But I guess a set of things that you could be doing, starting small, which is during your sprint demos, always be presenting at the beginning, ideally, that mission, that one or two slides to your stakeholders, so that they are always reminded, what are you trying to achieve? Where are you going? And obviously, they're giving you fresh feedback every week or every 2 weeks, because that will be changing for sure. You have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Nothing is usually set in stone. There are always some tweaks and changes as well. Besides that, you have some other tools in your toolbox. For example, you can, once you get going a bit, you have some deliverables which are aligned to that mission and vision. Obviously, you can have proper showcases, like on a more organizational level, not only to the direct stakeholder, but to other people who not yet know about it, right? And get their feedback and hopefully get their buy-in as well. The other thing is try to work a bit lower level and do, for example, like communities of practice where you create discussion groups, workshops around the subjects with these principles, those in mind as well. And that's a great thing in terms of getting feedback as well, because outside of your core team, from other parts of the organization, you get feedback around that mission and vision that you just set up. So yeah, I guess it's constant communication, constant trying to get feedback, constant alignments, and being aware that nothing is set in stone, and being prepared to be flexible in that area and alter some of the pieces of that.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Simon?
Yeah, no, sorry, Mike. I think that's right. And something you said there really resonates with me. And it's something that I've probably underestimated, perhaps earlier in my career as well, is how much you need to communicate and how consistent you need to be. I read something recently which resonated with me, which is that, in terms of communicating a vision, you probably need to communicate 3 times as much as you plan to. And if you do that, that's about 1/3 of the total kind of communications exercise that you actually need to put in place. So I think you're right that, really kind of think carefully about how you're going to communicate. So I think there's various channels, as you've mentioned, and we can perhaps talk about some of those. And the kind of need to do that on a really consistent basis. And I guess people will tell you if they think that, you're communicating too much. But in my experience, it's probably been the other way. And I've either not communicated enough myself, or I've seen kind of leadership teams not communicate enough, and then you lose that alignment. That word that you mentioned there is super important here, isn't it? Once people are misaligned with that vision, it's then quite difficult to get people back on track.
Just something if I can add to that, what I observed from my experience is that it may take a while before you get any feedback, to be honest, because it may take a while for the message to sink in a bit. So a couple of those demos, couple of times presenting that mission and vision, and don't be discouraged, right? You have to be persistent. That's another key part of having that mission vision. You need to be persistent, especially at the early stages, because from my experience, it takes a while before you get proper feedback, or even any feedback, because people need to process that. It's usually something we're talking like cloud migration, software modernization, transformation. These are subjects and ideas and topics that never came to these people's heads usually, let's say, and they need to have some time to process that. And how would that merge nicely with the existing ways of working, or how would that transition be? So give them a bit of time, bit of room, let's say, to breathe as well and process that information. So this is from my experience, one thing I can add as well. So be persistent.
That's absolutely right. I think it will take some time for some people to give some feedback, and that's absolutely fine and acceptable. But also something you touched on there is really important here, and that's having different ways of providing feedback and different ways of communicating. So I think some people will be happy and comfortable giving feedback in a stand-up, as you said, or those sorts of ceremonies and meetings. Other people would feel more comfortable giving feedback in a community of practice type setting. And for others, perhaps it's more one-to-one. That's the kind of mechanism that would work for them. Other people, they want to perhaps just give feedback in a different format altogether. So perhaps they want to provide feedback in the form of a survey or a questionnaire, or at least in some form of writing, and that's how they feel comfortable. And I think all that is fine. However that feedback is received, it's all welcome, genuinely, and accept that, as you said, perhaps there won't be an immediate feedback loop. It will take some time, and as you said, be patient, but also don't lose heart, and don't think that that's the time to stop communicating. If anything, I think that's the time to almost ramp up the communication so that the key messages are continuing to land.
Mm-hmm. Or even maybe at some point try to present it from a maybe different angle. Maybe so if you come up with that initial version and it doesn't bring in that feedback that you're like striving for, maybe try to present it from a different angle as well. So maybe a couple of versions of that as well. I guess it'll be a different version that you'll be presenting to like a CTO compared to like a community of practice of engineers as well.
Correct.
So probably even various versions of that in terms of like level of granularity and detail, depending on the place where are you trying to present it as well.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe for the final parts of our first episodes, maybe let's now ask a question like, what do you think are the consequences of not asking the why?
This is a really important aspect here, isn't it? I think not asking why risks right from the outset people not doing all the things that we talked about initially. So not really buying into this, not feeling motivated, and critically perhaps just not feeling aligned at all. So I think there are some of the consequences of not asking why. And then what could that result in? Well, I guess there's a range of things here really, but I guess ultimately the kind of fundamental impact here may be that you just don't make anywhere near the impact, or you don't make the strides towards achieving that vision at all. So perhaps the team goes off in quite a different direction because they just haven't fundamentally understood why we're doing this. And I think that will be quite easy to do if that why hasn't been addressed and understood. And there's probably something here about focus, isn't there? I think for this kind of, to achieve anything certainly transformational, it's difficult, and it needs to be a sustained effort and an aligned effort over probably quite a long period of time. So if the team doesn't have that focus on that North Star, say, because the why hasn't been understood, it's not about not working hard or anything like that, or not being motivated, but there's a risk, I would say, around perhaps just not having that focus on achieving that endpoint. So I think that would be the consequence. But yeah, what do you think on that one?
Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned about like what you deliver may not be up to the standard that your stakeholders are expecting, but I think that's the best case scenario, right? So you did deliver, it's what they asked for, the quality is just not there. So I think that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is just you deliver something completely different, right? Or something that's they didn't expect because you didn't align with them early enough and often enough throughout the process, right? You just did what you think is right based on your experience. Yeah. And basically, which brings in another thing from my experience that might start to come into the picture, which is something called like feature creep, right? So even trying, because there is no clear vision, there are, again, you allow for experimentation, yeah, that's fine, but you're not trying to bring it all together. What's the mission vision, like overarching? And you get a lot of those various threads, let's say, that were started, but in the end are not in line with that mission and vision in the end, right? So the so-called feature creep, I guess,
Yes.
from my experience, that's a threat, definitely.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I guess that's the other aspect of maybe not having 100% focus and alignment on that vision, isn't it? Really, that it's then difficult for perhaps for a team to understand when that feature creep is taking place and taking hold, and saying, hey, hang on a minute, if we go down that path, remember, we're not really going to achieve the vision perhaps that we set out to at the start of this. So I think, yeah, without that fundamental understanding of why we're doing this, I can see how that can creep in, and I've experienced that, and I guess you have, and lots of other people have as well. And also, you touched on something there as well, that perhaps, unless there is that understanding of why, perhaps at the outset you're not going to get that feedback, that initial feedback from the team, which may help to shape the vision based on their experience and the fact that they're perhaps a little bit closer to the ground, closer to the operational side of things. So without really trying to engage on the why, you perhaps do potentially miss out on some rich feedback at the outset, which could really make quite a significant difference in terms of your vision and how you articulate that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And definitely from my experience, if that overarching mission and vision is like, and also as all the engineers, we are engineers and we love to code, we love to create awesome things in the state of the art way. And if that's mission vision does not contain that business aspect, again, you may create something amazing, state of the art, latest technologies, everything is perfectly test automated, there's DevOps automation, but it just doesn't do what it's supposed to do for the business, right? So you created something amazing technically, but it's useless, right? And that's that's a tragedy, I would say. Somewhat.
Yes, I agree. And I guess the other angle here, or one other angle, is, projects and programs, they can be difficult and they can be long running. And so, surely people need to feel that there is a meaning and a purpose to their work, to stay motivated, right throughout. I guess let's be honest here, that can be difficult to maintain over, as I said, a long period of time. But I think understanding the why can give you that meaning and bring that purpose to your work, and can hopefully help a team stay, fully focused and motivated throughout the duration of the project, because there's always ups and downs, isn't there? These things don't go in straight lines. And I think having an appreciation of why we're doing this supports that that purpose, and having that sense of purpose throughout the project, which I think is really, really important. I think that's what people generally come to work for, to feel like they have an opportunity to add some value, or to change something, or to have an impact.
So I think you touched on a very important subject, which is, as a team lead, you need to take care of your team's morale and well-being. And the thing that you can do to make sure that, the morale is low and well-being is also low, is to not take care and create that mission vision along with your team members initially, and then iteratively as well throughout the project cycle, basically. So in the end, like whatever they'll be doing, they'll be always questioning, why am I doing this? And if there is that clear why, because we want to modernize so that the business can release faster, so that our updates are getting, in a couple of minutes, a matter of minutes to our clients instead of days, and also give us an edge in terms of our competitors. So it's much more meaningful, and I guess people are just more productive as well, right? If they see that, if there's just, you need to just make sure you complete your ticket, that kind of vision. It's a quite sad place, to be honest.
I think that's right. Yeah, and I guess ultimately, what would be a good measure of success here is, if the team is almost playing back the why to themselves and reminding themselves of that, rather than a leader or a leadership team feeling that they need to step in and remind everybody. The reverse would be great, is if without that happening, the team themselves are reminding themselves and their colleagues perhaps outside their team as to why they're doing something. Because then I think you've got people bought in. They're able to explain the why themselves rather than someone reminding them.
It's like a perfect situation for a team lead as well. I can imagine, because obviously there are deadlines, and the stakeholders are asking when it's going to be finished. So sometimes the team lead may be pushing a bit some of the things to go faster, and it's like a ideal situation where your team actually comes back to you. Well, we came up with this mission vision together, and like with your leadership. Now you're trying to make us forget about this part of the vision because of some deadlines. But come on, it's like this is like the perfect situation, I guess, you would like to be in.
Precisely. Yeah, I think that's a great conversation. It might be difficult for someone to be on the receiving end of it, but I think that's a really good position to be in, isn't it? The team you've achieved ownership, I think, by that stage.
Great. Awesome. So, Simon, just to sum up, any final thoughts?
It's a good reminder for me, this conversation, of the importance of investing in articulating the why at the outset, which I think can be a challenging thing to do in a concise way. But I think the effort pays off. The effort that you pay up front in creating that vision, as we said, in quite a simple format, but also something that is truly visionary, that people hopefully buy into. That effort up front, I think, can pay off throughout the duration of the project or the change. And I think the flip side of that is, by not putting that effort in initially, then you risk all sorts of challenges around misalignment and feature creep, those things we talked about, Mike. So for me, it's been a good reminder of the value of investing that time, at the outset, but also then consistently communicating the why, throughout the change is really important.
Well, yeah, I think that's a perfect summary, Simon. I can only underline from myself, being persistent. Persistence is the key. Figure out the mission and vision is one thing, but then being persistent and communicating that, aligning on that, is also as equally important. So this is the end of our mission vision discussions. So we'll continue next time, mostly around like communication aspects. So how to effectively communicate down the chain of command and up the chain of command. So we'll delve a bit into that area. But for now, thanks a lot, Simon.
Thank you. Look forward to it next time.
Bye-bye.